The rain roared like a wild beast, tearing through the pitch-black night, pounding the slick asphalt smeared with muddy puddles. Under the flickering street lights, the city appeared like a haunted painting, cold, damp, and reeking of decay. In the filthiest corner of town, where drifters fought over scraps of bread fallen from careless hands, a shocking scene unfolded. Two hulking men with brutish faces were yanking a handbag from the frail grasp of an elderly woman. Her screams were drowned out by the downpour, but then, suddenly, a small figure burst from the shadows. Not a hero. Not a cop. It was Kael Draven, a scrawny delivery guy in a soaked, torn hoodie, eyes burning like fire in the storm. Kael pedaled his rusty bike, wheels screeching like they were about to split in half, gliding through the deserted street. His worn-out shoes squished with every stroke, each breath a ragged gasp from his bony chest. Tonight was a nightmare. Deliveries delayed by the rain, angry customers, and a few who had thrown coins at him like tossing scraps to a stray dog. But Kael didn't care. He was used to the biting cold, the gnawing hunger, and the sneers of people who thought they were above him. Just make it through the night, he told himself. That's enough. When he finally stopped at the greasy fast food joint where he worked, the manager, a grumpy middle-aged man with patchy stubble, tossed him a crumpled paper bag. Good job, kid, the man growled, voice rough like he'd been chewing cigars. Here. Leftovers. Don't say I never gave you anything. Kael nodded, lips cracked but forming a faint smile. The warmth of the bag in his hands felt like a fragile hope in the middle of the storm. He hopped on his bike and rode straight to his usual resting spot, a dilapidated bus stop with a leaky roof, barely enough to block the rain. Tonight he would eat. Tonight he would survive. Kael slumped onto the wet bench, hands trembling as he opened the bag. The smell of hot burgers and fries hit him like a wave, and his stomach growled like a beast starved for days. He reached in, about to take a bite when a strange sound cut through the rain. A weak, trembling moan, like the cry of a lost soul, echoed from the nearby alley. Kael froze, fingers tightening around the wrapper, his breath catching. Just a stray cat, he muttered, trying to brush it off. But the moan came again, louder this time, more desperate. Hunger screamed in his belly, but something stronger, maybe conscience, maybe foolishness, forced Kael to stand. He stuffed the food under his soaked hoodie and stepped into the pitch-dark alley. The stench of rotting concrete and garbage hit him hard. The flickering light behind him cast jittery shadows dancing across the brick walls. Then he saw it, a German shepherd, skin clinging to bone, its fur matted and drenched, curled up against a crumbling wall. It shivered violently, ribs jutting out like knives. Its eyes, God, those eyes, deep and hollow, a mirror of the hunger Kael lived with every day. Kael knelt, breath turning to white mist in the freezing air. The dog tensed, ears folded back, but it was too weak to flee, too weak to resist. Kael looked at the food in his hands, then back at the dog. He was starving, so hungry he felt dizzy. But those eyes told him his hunger was nothing compared to this creature's. Without hesitation, he tore the burger in half and placed one part gently on the filthy ground. For a moment nothing happened. The dog just stared like it couldn't believe what it was seeing. Then, with what little strength it had, it reached out, sniffed, and devoured the food in a heartbeat. Kael let out a dry chuckle, barely louder than the rain. Yeah, I know that feeling, he whispered, breaking off another piece. The dog ate ravenously, its tail giving a faint wag, the first sign of life Kael had seen in it. When the modest meal was gone, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The dog looked up at him, eyes a bit brighter now, its wet nose brushing gently against his hand. Kael sighed, shaking his head with a tired smile. Guess I'm not the only stray out here tonight, huh? He had no idea that in that very moment, under flickering lights and a persistent drizzle, a bond was forged between him and the dog he would soon name Shadow. Night fell like a heavy black curtain, wind howling through dilapidated streets, carrying the musty scent and icy breath of early winter. Kael pedaled his beat-up bicycle, its wheels clattering over uneven pavement, his eyes darting around like a hunted animal. Beside him Shadow, the silent black figure, walked with steady steps, ears perked, nose constantly sniffing the air. Since that fateful rainy night, Shadow hadn't left Kael's side. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. He simply followed like a guardian spirit, his amber eyes gleaming every time a streetlight flickered overhead. Kael's life had always been dark, but now, with Shadow beside him, something strange crept into his chest. Not quite hope, but a sense that he was no longer alone. After each shift, he would pedal back to that old alley where he had first met Shadow, just to check if the dog was still there. But Shadow always waited, tail wagging gently like a silent greeting. Kael started bringing scraps, charred fried chicken, cold fries, and laying them down before the dog. "Eat up, don't make me worry," he'd mutter, his voice hoarse from hunger and exhaustion. Shadow ate slowly now, no longer desperate, as if learning to trust him. But the world Kael lived in never allowed such quiet moments to last. One night, just as he stepped out of the fast food joint, legs numb from 8 straight hours of deliveries, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Kael Draven." Frank, the manager with his beady eyes and patchy beard, stormed over, hands on hips like a prison warden. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Startled, Kael turned around to see Frank glaring at Shadow, who sat calmly in the shadows near the bike rack. I'm just feeding him," Kael stammered, shivering from the cold and hunger gnawing at his bones. "Feeding him?" Frank snarled, stepping closer, his breath stinking of cheap cigarettes. "You using my money to feed a mangy stray? I've seen you slacking on deliveries lately, now I know why." Kael clenched his fists, nails digging into his frozen palms. "It's my money," he said through gritted teeth, trying to hold onto a shred of pride. "I used my last damn coin." Frank snorted, a smug grin twisting his lips. "I don't care. If you're late again tomorrow, even by a minute, don't bother coming in. Got it?" He turned and walked away, leaving Kael in the cold, his breath fogging the air, his eyes burning with helpless rage. That night, Kael didn't sleep. He lay curled on a paper-thin mattress at the orphanage, rain tapping a grim rhythm on the tin roof. Shadow wasn't allowed inside, another damned rule, so Kael had left him under the eaves, wrapped in a tattered blanket he'd smuggled out. But Shadow's amber eyes haunted him. The dog didn't whine, didn't beg, just looked at him with quiet, unwavering trust. Kael turned over, pulling the blanket over his head, telling himself he couldn't let Shadow starve out there. Not ever. The next day, everything collapsed faster than Kael expected. That morning he biked through crowded streets, sweat running down his temple despite the biting cold. He'd stopped for just 5 minutes, just 5, to buy a stale loaf of discount bread, tearing it in half and stuffing most of it into Shadow's mouth. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered, ruffling the dog's head before rushing off. But 5 minutes was all it took. When he burst into the fast food place, 7 minutes late, Frank was waiting, arms crossed, wearing a razor-thin smile. "You're done, kid," he said, voice calm but cutting. "I need someone reliable. Not a stray-chasing loser." "Frank, please," Kael begged, voice cracking under the weight of desperation. "I need this job. I've got nothing else." But Frank only shook his head, those beady eyes as cold as ever. "Tough luck. Get out." Kael stood there, heart pounding like it would break through his chest, feeling the whole world crumble beneath his feet. No job. No money. Just a few coins in his pocket and a pair of soaked, torn shoes. He turned and walked out, shoulders heavy. But when he saw Shadow still waiting, ears twitching, tail giving a soft wag as if to say "I'm still here," Kael felt his throat tighten. "It's just you and me now, huh?" he whispered, kneeling to stroke the dog's head. Shadow nudged his cold nose into Kael's palm like he was saying, "I don't mind." But fate wasn't done with them yet. As Kael pedaled back to the orphanage, his mind swirled with panic over how they'd survive. A greater challenge was already waiting. He'd just stepped through the gate, Shadow quietly trailing behind like always, when a sharp, cutting voice rang out. "Kael Draven, stop right there." Ms. Margaret, the orphanage director, a gaunt woman with silver hair and a tight bun and beady eyes behind thick glasses, pointed at Shadow, face flushed with fury. "What is that filthy thing?" Kael stepped forward, trying to shield Shadow behind him. "He's not doing anything wrong," he said, voice trembling but firm. "He just follows me." Miss Margaret marched over, her heels clacking on the creaky wooden floor. Rules are rules. No animals. This is a home for children, not a kennel. Kael's fists clenched again, fingernails digging into his palms. He has nowhere else to go, he said, voice hoarse with desperation. Miss Margaret sneered, her smile as cold as the wind outside. Then make a choice, Kael. The dog, or the roof over your head? The hallway air grew thick. Behind cracked doors, other children peeked out, silent. Kael looked down, his hand shaking as it brushed Shadow's wet fur. He knew if he left the dog out there in the cruel city, Shadow would die, of hunger, of cold, or by the hands of some twisted street kids. He looked up, meeting Miss Margaret's gaze with steel in his voice. I choose him. She blinked, briefly surprised, but then pointed to the door. Then get out. Kael didn't say another word. He turned and walked out the orphanage door for the last time, Shadow silent at his side. The wind sliced through them, dragging the last remnants of the storm across the street. Kael pulled his tattered hoodie over his head, his hands trembling, not just from cold but because he'd just lost everything. Home, work, the last shred of stability. But when he looked down and saw Shadow still beside him, those golden eyes unwavering, Kael smiled, bitter and small. Welcome to my world, Shadow, he whispered. And together they stepped into the night, unaware that the greatest trial still lay ahead. The night was as heavy as a velvet curtain draped over the city, the wind howled through the empty streets, carrying a bone-chilling cold. Kael Draven dragged his feet along the cracked sidewalk, his torn shoes soaked and squelching with each step, his breath misting in the freezing air. Beside him, Shadow walked steadily, his wet fur clinging to his body, but his golden eyes still shone brightly, like two small flames guiding the way through darkness. They had wandered for hours, searching for shelter, a vacant warehouse, a park bench, anywhere to hide from the biting wind. But it was all hopeless. The warehouses were already full of silent figures, and the park lurked with dangerous eyes from roaming gangs. Kael hugged his ripped hoodie tighter, stomach growling with hunger, but he didn't say a word. Shadow needed him to be strong and he couldn't let him down. Suddenly a scream tore through the night. Kael flinched and turned, his eyes catching a terrifying scene under the flickering streetlight. Two men in black hoodies struggling with an elderly man, the old man's expensive coat ripped on one side. One of the thugs grabbed the man's collar, a thin-bladed knife gleaming in his other hand, while the second tried to rip a wallet from the man's grasp. Give it here, old man, one of them growled. Kael didn't think. Adrenaline surged like a storm. He dropped his bicycle with a loud clatter and charged forward, shouting, "Stop!" The two attackers turned, surprised and furious. The elderly man collapsed to the sidewalk, gasping, still clutching his wallet. Kael lunged at the nearest thug, yanking his arm so hard that the knife clattered to the ground. But the other one was faster than Kael expected. A punch landed squarely on Kael's shoulder, sending him stumbling backward, head spinning. Then came a low, thunderous growl. Shadow leapt forward, fur bristling, teeth bared in a gleam of white beneath the streetlight. He stood protectively in front of Kael, barking with such force that it echoed across the street. The two thugs hesitated. Shadow lunged, not to bite but just enough to terrify. "Let's get out of here," one of them yelled. They bolted, disappearing into the shadows. Kael gasped for air, crawling toward the old man. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice shaky with pain and exhaustion. The man looked up, his face weathered with time, eyes shimmering with gratitude. I'm okay," he said, voice trembling. "You saved me." Kael shrugged, biting down the pain in his shoulder. "You needed help. That's all." Shadow stood close by, still alert, ears up like radar. The man slowly stood, dusting off his coat. "My name is Michael Dawson." Kael nodded, not thinking much of it, just another stranger in trouble. But then Michael turned his gaze to Shadow. His eyes widened and his face went pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Where did you find this dog?" he asked, voice lowered to a whisper. Kael frowned, then recounted the story. The rainy night, the burger he shared, how Shadow had followed him ever since. Michael crouched down and stared at Shadow intently. The dog stood still, ears twitching, tail gently wagging. Hunter? Michael called softly, his voice breaking. Shadow, no. Hunter tilted his head, golden eyes flashing with recognition. Michael exhaled sharply, hand trembling as he reached for the soaked fur. It's you. Oh my God, it's really you. Kael stood frozen. Michael explained, his voice thick with emotion. Hunter had once been his family's guard dog, raised since he was a pup. 2 years ago, during a break-in at Michael's estate, Hunter had fought the burglars, been injured, and disappeared. I searched for weeks, posted rewards everywhere, Michael said, eyes red. I thought he was dead. Kael looked down at Shadow, Hunter, his heart tightening. He had a family, a real home. Something Kael never had. He knew what was coming. Michael would take Hunter back. And Kael would be alone again. But Michael didn't do that. He stood up, placed a firm hand on Kael's shoulder, his eyes steady. You saved my life tonight, he said. And you saved Hunter when he was starving. I can't separate the two of you. Kael blinked, not trusting what he heard. What do you mean? He asked, voice cracking. Michael smiled, a rare warmth in the cold night. I want to help you. Not just with money or a job. I want to give you a home, for both of you. Kael stood frozen, mind blank. A home? That was a luxury he'd never even dared to dream of. The days that followed were like a change in the wind. Michael wasn't just talking. He took Kael and Hunter to his home, a large house with white walls and a warm fireplace. Kael got his own room, a soft bed instead of a torn mattress, new clothes to replace the holy hoodie. Michael enrolled him in school, insisted that Kael believe he deserved a future. At first, Kael doubted it all. He was used to hunger, cold, to surviving one day at a time. But every morning, waking to see Hunter curled beside the bed, tail wagging gently when Kael opened his eyes, he started to believe it was real. Hunter changed quickly, his coat sleek again, body strong, but what never changed was his loyalty to Kael. He still followed Kael everywhere, waited at the school gate, lay under the desk when Kael studied late into the night. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky a brilliant orange, Kael sat on the porch steps, holding a peanut butter sandwich. He smiled, tore it in half, and placed a piece in front of Hunter. The dog looked at him and gently ate it, just like that rainy night. We've come a long way, huh? Kael whispered, stroking his head. Hunter nuzzled into his hand, warm and peaceful. Kael's story is proof that a small act of kindness can change a life. From sharing a burger in the rain, he found a friend, a family, and a new beginning. And Hunter, once a lost dog, found his way back home, not just to Michael but to Kael, the boy he chose to stay loyal to forever. Life can be harsh, but a small act of compassion, whether sharing a meal or offering a hand, can spark miracles in the most unexpected ways. Don't be afraid to give, because kindness always finds its way back, sometimes in the most beautiful form you could ever imagine. If you found this story touching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories about loyalty, love, and second chances. Let's spread the message that kindness can change the world, one story at a time.